Imagine a mind just completely unraveling under the heavy weight of a crown. Welcome, focused learners, to this grim, dark explainer. We're skipping the usual intro today because we need to plunge directly into a truly theatrical Gothic fable. We're looking at the descent into total mental isolation of a terribly frightened ruler. It's this fascinating text that pits a terrified sovereign, the Puppet King, against a truth-telling demon, and we're going to explore the psychological horrors of absolute control and, honestly, the terrifying, beautiful necessity of chaos.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our descent begins with a single, absolutely devastating truth. The demon doesn't arrive with fire and brimstone, He arrives with this cynical, cold clarity. He tells the king, "I am the shadow that gives your light its shape, for I know what you refuse to admit." The demon's voice throughout this whole story is basically a dark mirror, exposing the terrifying reality that the king's entire kingdom is built on a foundation of profound weakness.
Section 1. The demon's cynical shadow and finding truth in friction.
This is where our descent into madness really gets going. The demon completely shatters the king's illusion of a peaceful, singular kingdom. He points out that truth doesn't actually exist in the quiet, undisturbed echoes of absolute power. Instead, truth is found only in the friction of the many, not the silence of the one. To the demon, life is fundamentally Dionysian. It's chaotic, it's fragmented, and it is endlessly blooming with multiplicity. He offers this raw, shifting reality to the king, but the Puppet King is completely paralyzed by it. He fears this shifting perspective, right? So he desperately seeks what the text calls a seamless past, which, as the demon cynically points out, is just a shroud meant to cover up a really weak, frightened soul.
Moving on to Section 2, the absolute I's void and the parable of the giant.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the concept of the not I. The demon weaves these parables to make his point, using dense Fichtean logic as basically a tragic plot point. In Fichte's philosophy, for the absolute I, the self, to even know it exists, it requires a limit. It needs the not I, an external boundary to push against, to provide friction. Without the not I, there's no self-awareness. Actually, worse than that. Without something to resist us, we go completely, entirely numb.
The demon illustrates this beautifully with his first tale, the parable of the giant. He tells of this giant who stood in a perfect vacuum. Literally nothing existed but the giant himself. He claimed to be the absolute I, enjoying a total monopoly of existence. But because there was no wind to buffet his face and no earth to resist his heavy steps, he couldn't even feel his own limbs. By achieving absolute control, he just became a motionless heap in an empty room. It proves that total control doesn't make you a god, it just causes a complete inner collapse.
Section 3. The Apollonian Illusion, the parable of the painted stone.
So we step down into the next level of the king's isolation with the second parable. In this one, a ruler is absolutely terrified by the wild, tangled growth of his kingdom's groves. Life is just too unpredictable. So what does he do? He orders every single living flower to be ripped out and replaced with smooth, painted stones. He looks at this dead garden and calls it perfect, seamless order, claiming he's captured eternal beauty. But by trying to tame those tangled groves, he killed the soil, he chased away the bees, he completely stripped his kingdom of actual life.
This brings us to a really sharp comparison, the Dionysian reality versus the Apollonian illusion. On one side, Dionysian reality is chaotic, blooming, and totally welcoming of the struggle. On the other, the king's Apollonian illusion is sterile and rigid. The demon's mockery here is incredibly biting. He calls out the king's fragile ego, basically saying this so-called order is nothing more than the cultural castration of life. You're trading vitality for a graveyard just so you don't have to be scared.
Section 4. Erasing the chaotic multiplicity, exploring masks and masters.
Let's guide you deeper into this narrative descent with the third tale, which exposes the symptoms of a truly weak will. The parable of the thousand masks. Picture a marketplace full of diverse travelers, all wearing different masks, speaking different tongues. A monarch arrives, and he is terrified of this chaotic multiplicity. So, his solution? He forces every single person in that marketplace to wear a mask of his exact face. He thinks he's assimilated the world, but really he's just surrounded himself with echoes of a lie. As the demon cruelly notes, the monarch thought he had assimilated the world, but he soon realized he was merely dancing on the strings of his own deep insecurity. It's a great line. By erasing the not I, he hasn't unified his world at all. He's just revealed total terror, not strength.
Let's walk through this timeline to see the progression, the descent of cultural exhaustion. Year 1, isolating the self in the void. Year 10, freezing nature with the stones. Year 100, assimilating peers with the masks. And finally, year 1000, destroying opposition entirely. This brings us to the fourth tale, the parable of the two masters. A master possessed by a weak will simply cannot endure the tension of having a neighboring peer. Because he lacks the strength to compete, he literally burns his neighbor's home to the ground and brands him a demon, just so he can claim his own monopoly as good.
Section 5. The Puppet King's Defense. The Sovereign's Cage.
Okay, but the Puppet King doesn't just sit there and take this. We get this frantic, paranoid rebuttal. Look at these justifications. He says he must clear the groves of heresy. He has to prevent the world from shattering into useless fragments. He must destroy the chaos of friction, assimilate the not-I completely, and ensure a peace that lasts forever. You can really contrast his desperate need for absolute control against the demon's smooth, cynical logic.
The king sneers at the demon, stating, "My truth is the singular narrative that allows a kingdom to finally sleep in silence." He truly views striving against the limit as just the hobby of a nomad, not something a sovereign does. He thinks he's protecting his realm, but let's be real. A sleep in total silence, completely devoid of friction, is indistinguishable from death.
Section 6. Collapse of total control. The singular narrative.
This brings our explainer to its climax. What happens when the singular narrative finally wins out? By erasing the so-called evil opposition to claim a total monopoly on good, the king proves he is no longer strong enough to face reality. He completely fails to grasp the necessity of the not-I, turning his peers into monstrous abominations out of pure weakness. His singular narrative hasn't saved him, it's just hollowed him out.
The demon's cynical shadow reaches way past this Gothic fable, right into how we curate our own lives, our own echo chambers, and our own seamless narratives. So I leave you with this haunting question to chew on. In your own quest for a seamless life, have you actually conquered your world, or have you just emptied the room?